You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to part 3 of the Making of Addressing Gettysburg. Just to recap parts 1. Well, by the way, my name's Peter. This is part 3. If you don't know who I am, go back to part 1. We've been interviewing Matt and Bob about the making of the show.
The irony is that now this is the part where we talk about things that Bob is involved with, but he had to go.
Bob had to go. So poor playing on our part, but we're here and we're doing this. In parts 1, we talked about just, kind of the evolution of the show, how they're written, how it's narrated. In part 2, we really took a deep dive into the sounds and the music, which I particularly find fascinating, and I love the fact that it's original music that you're getting for the show. Beyond the narrative episodes, you have put out a couple of other series of shows.
Yeah.
Partially to fill in the space in between, because you said in part 2 that it takes 6 months on average to make one of the narrative episodes. Mm-hmm. And I know that one of the things that we talked about is, and then the beauty of this podcast is that you are bringing Gettysburg to people who can't be here.
Right.
And so how do you do that? You don't want to do that once every 6 months.
Right.
You want to do that on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So you came up with the Ask a Gettysburg Guide.
Right. Oh, yeah. So, like you said, you want to keep the audience going and growing, too. Mm-hmm. When I started doing the Ask a Guide thing, I had I think it was probably like 4 months after the first episode came out. And I had the first episode, and then I put the Scott Hartwig interview about the Killer Angels out. Close together, because I figure everybody, a lot of people have been introduced to Gettysburg by the movie or the novel, so why not do that, put that out there and let people listen to it. And so then, people are like, hey, when's episode 2 coming out? It's been 3 months. Oh, when's it coming out? It's been 4 months. And so I said, all right, well, I got to do something. And I noticed that the numbers for episode 1 and Scott's were going up. I mean, always going up. Every month they were going up. I mean, those two are the most listened to, most downloaded. I don't know if they're listened to, but they're most downloaded episodes out of all of them. They've also been up the longest, so that makes sense. But so Ask a Gettysburg Guide. The idea for that is to engage the audience. I always say if you listen to if you're a patron on Patreon, you'll notice that for a lot of the earlier episodes there, I always, after the introduction, before we get to the actual interview, I always say, I'm learning, you're learning, so let's learn together. And that's because I'm not an expert. I'm just a podcast producer who happens to be a history buff, but I know a lot of experts, so I'm going to bring them to you. So let's bring the audience to the guides and the guides to the audience.
So the format is you have a guide. You always have Bob as your co-host.
Bob's the co-host.
And then you've got a different guide, or, sometimes there's repeats.
Yeah, but you have regulars.
You are taking questions from people basically on Instagram and Facebook, correct?
Yeah, right. I call. We're going to do another Ask a Guide. Send in your questions. They send them in, and then I ask them for everybody. It's a pretty basic thing, but people seem to really like it because I hear that. Let's see. They say that it is approachable, meaning the subject is approachable. It's not intimidating or daunting or uncomfortable in any way, or it's entertaining for them. It's easy for them to listen to, which is the goal. Because again, like we were saying in episode or in part 2 of this whole thing, you got to entertain people, right? Otherwise you're going to put them to sleep. And now that doesn't mean that everybody has to be a performer first and then a history or whatever you're talking about second. It just means that you got to take into mind that people are looking to these things for entertainment and enlightenment and education and whatever else they're looking to podcast for. Mm-hmm. So you got to try to do all those different things. And if you don't really have it, you got to work at it, because it's a different ball game than just sitting and talking to people.
Well, and that's where the guides and the rangers are perfect for this because this is what they do on a regular basis. They are engaging the public, the general public of people that walk into the visitor center and don't know anything about Gettysburg, can't even find the building. And, you know, and, you know, they have to, you know, kind of give them an overview. So they're trained to be approachable and to make it palatable.
Right. And that's the thing is that most of the people that come here and yeah, exactly what you're saying. They have to deal with people who are new to all of this stuff. Yeah. And so,
but they're also, on the flip side, they're also expert enough to answer some of the more detailed questions, or even if they don't know, they know where to find the answers.
Right.
And that sometimes makes you just as knowledgeable as knowing where to find the answers.
And, you know, when we get the questions that come in, I always give them to the guides ahead of time because they like to be prepared.
Sure. It's not Stump the Guide.
No, it isn't Stump the Guide. Right. And that's right. Exactly. That's not what I'm trying to do. And that's not what the audience wants. So I give them the questions ahead of time, and sometimes, you know, I'll get a call the day before we record, and they'll say, you know, this question about Culp's Hill, you know, there really isn't an answer to that one. And I go, well, then that's the answer. Yeah. I said, this is about people learning about this stuff. So if there is no answer, then let them know that there is no answer. Or if there's kind of an answer, but nobody's really sure, then let them know what the options are, you know?
Right. The answer is almost, that's why it's still a question.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, because there's no answer. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I love it because I look up to all these guys. I mean, the amount of knowledge that they have in their heads is so immense that, and I hope that someday I'll be able to have a fraction of that in my head. Okay, I have a fraction of it in my head now, but a larger fraction. And because, you know, I mean, you can, even if they don't really know the specific answer, they can give you enough of an answer, like in just general conversation, they can give you enough of an answer that you will know that, like, okay, I at least know where to start looking now, you know? So
and that's what I really like about, kind of on the flip side, is that I'm never the person to ask a question, like in school or like at a lecture we were at today.
Right.
I'm never the guy to raise my hand and ask a question.
Right.
But I love when other people do, because it's like, oh, that's a good question. And that's what I like, because the listeners have provided such great questions, and I'm thinking, oh, that's a really, there was one about the high water mark in the Western Theater, not even to do with Gettysburg.
Right.
But it was just like, I never thought about that, you know? What was that? And so they got into that a little bit. That was really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. The listeners are good, and they obviously know a lot. You can tell by the questions that they ask. So they're not like, and it's not that we don't have very basic beginner questions, you know, like, I don't know, like where does the battlefield start?
Yeah.
You know, like stuff like that. We get those too, and we'll put them in, and not to mock the people, but to give them an answer so that they can then go on to the next question and learn more. It's all about learning more.
Right. And it's not just the history of the battle. It's also the history of the monuments, the history of tourism, the history of the Guide Association. There's so many different facets of Gettysburg that need to be explored. And I think this is a great way to do that. Beyond the narrative episodes, because that's really just the history, and you haven't even gotten to Gettysburg yet.
No,
with that.
Right. No, the thing I love about the national park is that there are so many layers of history there on the grounds that you can find. I mean, you can find, you know, old fence lines from, you know, when the War Department ran the park, and you know, there's just all these different there's 1.5 million different layers of, not 1.5 million, of course, but you know what I mean. There are a lot of different layers of history on the park that you could never really run out of topics doing a show about Gettysburg, because there's always something to talk about.
I was talking to Bob earlier today, and he's not with us, but he was a guide for 30 years, and he's on the battlefield constantly, and he said he saw some things on Culp's Hill that he's never known before, you know, and so there's just, even after all that time, there's still little discoveries to be made.
Because you know why? Because the other day, me and Bob got out of the car.
Okay, so talk about get out of the car. That's been, we've heard that.
What an interesting segue. Okay, go ahead.
That wasn't in the notes, but
no, it wasn't.
Yeah. No, so talk about get out the car. You've announced on the third Saturday of the month of the warm month, starting in April and going through October.
October.
you have the Get Out of the Car battlefield walks.
Right. So this year the theme is Get Out of the Car, which probably I'll just keep that every year. And the idea is that we're going to see things that you can only see if you get out of your car and walk. And maybe you can only see it too if you have a guide with you who knows where to find the stuff, because it's not like all you got to do is get out of your car and these things will present themselves. You still have to know where to go. Were you going to say something?
I would just so people kind of get where this is coming from, is that most people that come to visit Gettysburg will do what's called the auto tour. And it's different markers around the battlefield, and you do the auto tour, and you drive through town. And I think the average stay at Gettysburg is like 6 hours or something like that. That's on average. So it means.
Where'd you see that?
I remember when we lived down here.
Oh, okay.
Like that was it.
Yeah.
Because the average is so low, even though people stay for the weekend, right? It's so low because people will drive through for an hour and just do the auto tour, and they see 12 things.
And they go.
And there's so much more that you can't see unless you get out of the car.
Right. And in my opinion, you have to have a guide. And I say this, when people come to Getty's bike tours and they ask us a question because they think we're the visitor center. And they ask me, what should I do? How do you recommend we see this thing? The first thing I say is, how much time do you have? And if they have more than 3 hours, if they have at least 3 hours, I say, go to the visitor center, get a guide to take you around in your car. And I tell them, like, honest, and this is my honest opinion. I believe that if you are not with a guide, you're not doing Gettysburg the right way. For your first, to me, your first like 6 times coming here, you should always have a guide with you. At least, for one tour during that weekend. And each time you come here with a guide, your first time is going to be obviously a very general overview because you've never been here before. But then the second time, maybe you go, I was really interested in all the stuff that happened down by the Devil's Den. So then maybe, you spend a little more time there with the guide and you start zooming in on smaller things and you learn more about the thing. But these guides, it's not easy to get that license. They don't give them on demand. So you have part of the thing that's not easy is waiting for them to even give the test. And then if you give the test, there's many chances for you to fail and have to start over from the beginning again. So, if you see a guy who has a license, he's gone through a lot, especially if he's a younger guy, because they've made it harder. He's gone through a lot to get that license. So they they got to know what they're talking about, and you really they're great ambassadors to the rest of the world for Gettysburg.
And it's not just the knowledge; it's also how they present it. Yeah, that's part of the vetting and testing process of becoming a guide.
Right.
Which, if you listen to a couple, I think it's one of the first Ask a Gettysburg Guide. I think with Tim Smith, he gets into a little bit of that process of how they're chosen and kind of how it's changed over the years. So. The Get Out the Car battlefield walks are going to be kind of like hand-selected different areas of the battlefield with hand-selected guides, correct?
Not guides. Louis Trott, he is a guide who put together these tours. We've been talking about it since about August. And I said, because he likes those things that, are kind of obscure. And I said, well, that would be a cool thing to do, because I've been doing these videos for the past year. When I find something small and new out on the battlefield, I do a video about it, and I always say, this is another reason you got to get out of the car. So I said, why don't we make the theme of the tours Get Out of the Car 2020 # Get Out of the Car 2020. And so that's what we're doing. So the first one is going to be in conjunction with our Adopt a Position cleanup, which is a program that the park runs where you can adopt. It's like an Adopt a Highway, but you adopt the area around a monument. You don't actually adopt the monument because they clean the monument. So you're not going to do anything to the monument.
Right. You don't get a power washer.
No, or a blowtorch or anything. So we will clean. It's basically weeding.
It's weeding, yeah.
What did we do? We tore out some cedar saplings last year.
That was tough. We kind of cleaned up the rock wall because what are the positions?
We have the 59th New York, the 69th PA, which are both in front of the copse of trees, and then we have the 111th New York, which is in front of the Bryan Farm. all in the angle area there.
So there's the rock wall there. We had to clean that up a little bit. We had to get rid of some, like you said, the saplings. So it's, you know what? I like it. It's one little way to give back. I know we're just doing a little bit of work, but it's nice to be a part of this place that I love.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and you know what? And to be honest, like the positions we adopted, ladies and gentlemen, if you're afraid of like doing back-breaking yard work, you're not gonna.
It's easy
because there's
a lot of people.
Well, there's a lot of people that come, and then there's also, I mean, those positions are very popularly regularly tread upon, where there's really nothing growing, there's really no trash or garbage, it's very well taken care of. Right. Part of the reason why I chose them. But the national park also provides the gloves and the rakes and the cutters and everything else. Exactly. So you don't need to bring anything. Yeah, it is kind of neat. But anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to start at the North Carolina Monument, which is on the Confederate line, and then we're going to walk across. Last year for our April tour, we walked across from the Virginia Memorial, just a little south of the Virginia Memorial, where Garnett's Brigade started from, and we marched in the walked in the path of Garnett's Brigade up until we got to the 69th Pennsylvania, and then we did our cleaning. This year, we're going to go from the North Carolina Monument. I think we're going to follow some Mississippi units until over the Bliss Farm ruins, ladies and gentlemen, ruins, which we went to in October at the end of, we took a walk out there, remember? And it was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I've never been out there, so now April is a good time to do it because the grass isn't high yet, so you don't have to worry about ticks and stickers and prickers and chiggers and all these other things getting in your socks and pants and stuff, and so we're going to walk across the Bliss Farm. Lewis is going to do some history there of what happened, and then we're going to continue our walk up until we come up to the 111th New York, which is the monument that we'll be honoring this year. And we'll talk about what they did during the battle, and then when that's finished, we're going to do the cleanup. And then the since this is the opening kicker for the season, we're going to have a little private concert for ourselves. I think I mentioned this in the last one, right?
Yes, okay.
So there's a private concert starting at 4:30 at Mason-Dixon Distillery given by Sarah Larson and Danny Stewart. But that private concert, it's two shows. It's the private concert for us outside in the tent, and then they'll take a quick break, and then the general public will be able to come out there, and then they'll continue playing for another 2 hours, and whoever's there can listen. But we'll be like front and center for the show.
Yeah, I tell you what, we did the cleanup last year in April, and we ended the night at Mason-Dixon outside, and actually Matt Atkinson, who did our ranger he's a ranger, he did our walk, he came and hung out with us. That's probably one of my favorite days in Gettysburg.
Yeah, we had fun
all around.
Yeah, it was a fun time.
It was just just the history, the cleanup, something that's very distinctly Gettysburg, because we got a little tour of Mason-Dixon Distillery as well. Right. All these little things. I mean, if anyone hasn't been there, check it out.
Yeah,
the food is great. He grows, grain that's used in his that he used at the distillery on the battlefield. So I mean, it's just a very Gettysburg thing. So I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I love that place, and I hope we can continue to do things like this with Mason-Dixon, because Yanni, the owner of Mason-Dixon, is he gets it. Like he's a young guy, so he gets the whole thing. He gets how it all works. So that's why I like working with him. But yeah, so that's what we're gonna do. That's April 18th. It's free. You don't have to, it's sponsored by Mason-Dixon, so you don't have to pay for anything. Just come out and learn.
Well, you got to.
Well, you have to pay
if you're going to get a drink or something.
I'm
you
sorry.
Pay for that.
The tour is free.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you. The tour is free if you come to the show. Well, not to the show. The show is free as well. But if you come to Mason-Dixon and you hang out with us and stuff, I mean, if you're going to drink or eat, obviously you got to pay for that. That's not free. But it'll be a good time, and you get to meet some really cool people. I mean, we've become pretty good friends with the people that we met on our first one last April. We really had a good time, and our little community is growing here, and that's what I like, because that was my second objective, was to kind of build a community of what I call Getty's nerds to come here and just revel in the fact that we love this place and we love this history, and hopefully we're all cool personalities that get along with each other, and then maybe we make some friends.
Yeah, I think it's, being into Gettysburg and living outside of the area. Like in town, there's a ton of people that are into Gettysburg, right? They live here.
Yeah.
But to find those people elsewhere is difficult sometimes. And so it's, you're just finding some like-minded people.
Well, and a lot of people say that, this place always feels like home to them, even though they've never lived here. And so why not know some people, who live here, so that when you come here, it feels more like home. I'm going to go visit my friend, Ronaldo or Matt or whoever. So this is, again, even though like Gettysburg is a real small town and everything, our national park is our national park. It's for everybody. So everybody should feel comfortable coming here and having a good time.
So speaking of the national park, one final thing we'll talk about is the Gettysburg National Military Park Lecture Series.
Oh, yeah.
The Winter Lecture Series.
Winter, yes.
So basically, who wants to go on the battlefield when it's cold, right?
Not me.
Not a lot of people.
Sir.
So the Gettysburg National Military Park puts on these lectures, which we got to go to one today. And what are you doing with them?
Well, they don't put them on YouTube anymore, and the YouTube videos that they used to put up, they get some pretty good numbers. So people are obviously interested in them, and it's a simple reason of not being able to afford to come into compliance with the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act. They have to closed caption them. You have to have somebody there to literally go through and type in the captioning. Can't do it. So I said, I don't need to do that. I don't need to come in compliance with that for an audio podcast. So why don't I just go and record them? So I did. I got, I got the blessing of I don't need it because it's public domain. I don't need permission to go and record that. But I wanted to make sure that, everybody was cool with what I was doing and know that, I'm trying to, I guess I'm trying to do a public service, but I wanted them. See, this is the thing. I'm studying someday, if they ever give the test, to take the guide test.
Right.
So all this stuff really is for me to learn.
Yeah, and they really, it's not just about the history of the battle. Today was about the National Cemetery and World War II.
The World War II dead in the cemetery.
In the cemetery. There was one about with a musician and an artist who were artists in residence at Gettysburg, and they talked. One was about the mules. Of Gettysburg, the unsung heroes of Gettysburg. Yeah. So there's all
Army mules,
all these different topics. It's not just this is what happened at Pickett's Charge. Not that that's not interesting. No, this is just going beyond that. So definitely check those out. Those are free.
Those are free where anywhere podcasts are found. You'll find them up there. And I try in the titles to start off with what type of a show it is. So if it's a narrative episode, the first thing it says is narrative episode, so that it's easier to find. If it's a lecture, it starts with Gettysburg NPS, et cetera, et cetera. And if it's an Ask a Guide, it's Ask a Gettysburg Guide, number whatever. So I know I probably should, for SEO purposes, I shouldn't do it that way, but it became too cluttered in the feed. When you look at it, it's hard to see. So, but the numbers are good. I don't need the SEO.
Yeah.
What?
I don't know. I just lost that. Just made me lose my train of thought.
Why did it make you lose your train of thought?
Because it's important. The SEO is important.
I know it is.
So the Winter Lecture Series recordings, the Ask a Gettysburg Guide, the narrative episodes, everything we've talked about in this 3-part series are all provided free, and they are made possible because of the patrons over at Patreon. Can you just explain what Patreon is?
Okay. Patreon, I guess they call it crowdfunding, that type of a thing, sort of. It's basically like you've heard, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Kickstarter or GoFundMe. It's similar in the sense that I have something that I'm doing, hey, if you like it, please support me with some money or something. So
but it's for creatives.
It's for exactly. So the difference is that this is designed for creatives, musicians, podcasters, artists, whoever, for people who like what they do. It's like being a patron of Michelangelo or something like that back in the old days. That's what they got that from.
Or like sponsoring a public, like a PBS type of thing where
viewers like you.
Yeah.
So it's pretty simple. You go over to patreon.com. You start an account if you don't have one. It seems to be pretty simple to set up in that regard. I mean, I have a creator account, but that was pretty simple to set up, although it's a little more involved, but whatever. So I think it's pretty simple to set up for people who are just supporters, because there's some people I know that have done it that I'm quite surprised they were able to figure it out. So anyway, now what that is there is you go over, there's two tiers. There's a $15 tier, which gives you everything that I put up there. And then there's a $5 tier, which I kind of came up with for students and people might be out of work or something like that.
So you say everything you put up there. So you've got interviews with authors, with rangers, with people that have done lectures over at the national park this winter.
Yeah.
It's very more specific things.
Right.
It's really, it's
we have
exclusive content.
Yeah, I mean, technically, I guess it would be exclusive because you have to pay to get it, but it's more. Well, yeah, I mean, we'll use that word, I guess. And the idea isn't really to hold. I've heard the phrase "hold history hostage." It's not really to do that. It's really because this takes up a lot of time to do all this stuff. And so for people who appreciate it, if you want to see it continue and not have me burn out and quit, this will help. It's not support my lifestyle and I'm going to get rich off this. Nobody's ever going to get rich off of this, believe me. But it'll help. It'll put a dent in things. And so in return for your financial support, which I take very seriously, that you'd be willing to part with that money instead of just taking it, we're going to produce this content for you so that you actually get something more out of it for your money. And so, I think we're up to now, as of the recording, I think we just hit 33 today.
33, yeah.
Yeah, which is, let me do the math here. 28 more than I expected.
Yeah, absolutely.
So so that's what that is. So there are some free things over there, like my interview with John Heckman. That's free. And what was it? Tim Smith's lecture from the Farnsworth House about Jenny Wade. That is free as well. So there are some free things over there, and a lot of that is to do with the fact that I'm limited in space on the free feed. That when you listen on iTunes and Stitcher and all those things, I'm limited as to how much space I have there because we pay for a certain amount. And these lectures, the lectures and the size of some of the other files, they seem to be taking up a lot of space. So I've been putting free things over there as well on the Patreon thing. So yeah, and then the Patreon has a phone app too. A lot of people, I know Bob has a hard time because
I use the phone app.
He doesn't have room on his phone for a new app.
Oh.
So he listens through the browser, which it's not optimized for browser listening unless you're on a desktop or a laptop. Right. So there is that there.
Well, Matt, listen.
Yes, Peter.
I thank you for
welcome.
letting me interview you. We've turned the tables onto you.
Yeah,
It's been informative. I knew a lot of this stuff, and the reason why I wanted to do this with you is because everyone needs to hear these stories and how you're doing this stuff.
Oh, yes.
It's really...
What was there anything that you didn't know?
What? That today?
Today.
No. Well,
I'm leaving that in.
We talk a lot,
I know.
But I think
Well, wait. When we were talking about Lorena, you seemed to have an epiphany.
I never put the connection between the Aurora Borealis and the music. I just never put those together.
Yeah.
But that wasn't something you did. That's something that the Aurora Borealis did.
Right.
So, no, but it's... I don't think people realize, even on anything, a simple TV show, like there's a ton of work that goes into that.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of work that's going into this that you're doing with the help of some really great people, but I would say the brunt of it falls on you, and all the time-consuming, monotonous, tedious stuff is falling on you.
Yeah.
So I think just to kind of paint that picture a little bit, and to really highlight some of the really unique things that you're only going to find on this podcast, that's, I think, that thing that really makes it special and just, a step above.
Yeah, and thanks for saying that. And well, that's it. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Check us out at Addressing Gettysburg on Instagram, addressinggettysburg.com.
Yeah.
You can find the podcast on all the major podcast platforms, YouTube as well.
Yeah,
right? YouTube as well. That's a common platform for everyone. So please.
Now, YouTube, let me just say that real quick, because some people get confused. YouTube is a video site, and there is an image that shows on the YouTube videos, and when you hit play, you're going to hear audio, but nothing is going to move.
Right. It's not a video.
No, it's not a video. It's basically when we hit publish on our podcast feed and everything goes out to all the different places, it goes out there and YouTube automatically makes it a quote-unquote video file.
I believe Facebook is the same way.
Facebook is also the same way. And I notice that confuses a lot of people. They go, well, I listened to it, but I didn't see anything. and that's why.
It's an audio thing.
Right.
I love that because I can listen to it in the car.
Yes.
That's the best thing. And that's, I have a very short commute to work, and I'm almost like, I get mad because I'm like, oh.
What you need to do is leave like 2 hours early and just drive around the region. I hear from people that I guess there's a lot of people that listen who are on the road a lot for work, truck drivers and salesmen and things like that. And when I've noticed when I've put something out on a Sunday night, some of the comments I'll get is something like, oh, great, now I've got enough stuff to listen to while I'm driving around for work all week.
Yeah.
So.
Or in that 2-3 hour drive it takes you to come to Gettysburg, pop that in.
Yeah, and you know what?
Speaking of that on.
Yeah, what is this? Pop that 8-track.
Put your 8-track in.
This is another thing that I wanted to get into before we close is that, if you ever listen to an Ask a Gettysburg guide and you like one of the guides in particular and you would like to get a tour with them, just send me an email. I'll put you in touch and you can set that up. Bob, Tim have both, I think, they've both had people contact me and we set up the tours for them. Well, actually, no. Tim, I think, never hooked up with the guy, but regardless, people have contacted us.
But they have schedules too, where they're required to do certain things.
And
so see if you can make it happen.
No, that's what it was. It was the guy was coming on a day that I think Tim had to work or something like that, or I can't remember what it was. I hear too many stories; it's hard to keep them all together. But anyway, so that's something else that we are happy to do is put you in touch with these guides, because these guides are fantastic, and I'm all about guiding. I think that they're the rock stars of the area, if you will, as corny as that may sound. And so let us know if you could ever if we could ever do that. And I guess I'm going to rest back the hosting duties here, Pete.
I give it up here.
Thank you. Let me have my knife back. And okay. So thanks. Good job there, Pete, hosting that. It was nice to actually not have to host for once. And thank you in absentia to Bob for coming by and assisting us. And thank you all for listening. I hope we didn't bore you. I hope you enjoyed it and learned a little something. And stick with us. Yeah, that's about it. So thank you. We'll talk to you later. And we're out. Oh, I just threw my back out to it.